Good morning, welcome back. So we're back from a little break, and the first thing I want to do is I want to clean up some issues. So one thing that we didn't test last time that's most definitely broken is if we go to our settings page without being logged in, you can see that the redirect is fucked up. And why is the redirect fucked up? Well, the reason the redirect is fucked up is because when we added ASP.NET Core Identity, it overrode some of our cookie settings that we had in there previously. So let's go and take a look at our startup class. And if you remember, on a previous episode, we set the login path and we set the access denied path here, and it is completely ignoring that because when we add identity, even though we added identity up here and we're applying these settings afterwards, the ASP.NET Core Identity authorization filter is its own little world. So in order to resolve this, we're going to do something called configure application cookie, and we can put some new settings in here. So let's go ahead and do that. There we go. So we're going to say login path once again is auth, and access denied path is denied, and that should fix that. Let's just double check that real quick, and then assuming that works, I'm going to kind of do what it wanted to do anyway and move all of those pages into a separate folder, because we're gonna have let's just do settings. Yep, there we go. Now it works. Let's go ahead and log in and check the denied page. Well, actually I'm an admin, so I'll have access to that either way, but I do want to move these into a separate folder, and the reason for that is because we're going to have more than just the auth and denied page. We also have a register page, and we're also going to have a password reset page, a forgot password page. We're going to have a page to manage roles, all kinds of other shit. So we're going to create a folder called account. I didn't want to use the folder called account because I wanted to make a clear distinction between what comes out of the box as part of their pre-configured shit and what you actually have control over, but whatever. I think account is a pretty reasonable directory name. So we're going to grab the account file, the auth, the denied, the logout, and the register pages, and we're going to put them into there. And then we have some updating to do. So firstly, we're going to need to update these paths that we just created, and also the ones down here. We're going to need to update our layout. The nav bar in our layout is going to need, specifically here, this is going to be account/account, account/logout, and account/auth. Also, in our auth page, we redirect to account. That's now going to be account. Also, in our denied page, we're going to redirect to account auth. And also in our register page, we redirect to account down here somewhere. There we go. All right. I think that might be all we need. Let's check it out and see. Hopefully nothing's broken. So let's go ahead and log in. We get to the auth page. I'm going to log in. The account page works. I'm going to log out. The logout page works. If I go to settings, it should send me to the auth page. And if I log in as a user, let's see if I remember. What account? I don't remember. Hold on. Let's use, I think Bob's an admin too now. Also, that's not Bob's password. Bob is not an admin. Bob's a loser. So let's go to the settings page. And there we go. Our denied page works fine. Alright. So that takes care of that. Now the next problem is, let's go ahead and log out, and let's try to go to the settings page. So it correctly asks us to log in. However, when we log in, it doesn't take us back to the settings page because we hard-coded that. The other thing that you'll notice is that if I do try to go to the settings page and it redirects me to log in, it doesn't have that return URL provided anymore. Remember back when it was sending us to the 404, it had a query string that was telling us what the return URL was so that we could send them back? Well, that's not there anymore, so let's find out why. So let's go to our auth page, and we're going to create a property called return URL get and set, and we're going to bind it, and we're going to say that it supports get. And just that's why that wasn't working. And just to make it clear what's happening, let's put an info here, and we'll say model return URL so that we can see what the value of that is on the page. Alright, so now if we go to our settings page, you can see it redirects back. Nothing's changed. There's no query string here. But let's say that there was. Let's say we have return URL equals hi. You can see that that would show up on the page. So why is this query parameter that used to be there getting lost? Well, the reason it's getting lost is because it's actually not redirecting us to the login page. I know it's redirecting us to the login page, but let's take a closer look in Developer Tools. We'll turn on Preserve Log, and we'll go to Settings. And you can see that it's actually redirecting us to the denied page because, again, even though we're quote-unquote not logged in, we're actually logged in as the IP address, as a guest, because remember, this is a wiki, everyone's logged in. So it's actually that our denied page is dropping this. It's not passing it forward. It's just hard-coding us right to the auth page. So the next thing that we have to do is we have to go to our denied page and add a parameter there, add a property there. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to say public string, return URL, get set, will, bind property, supports get equals true. And now we can pass that along in our redirect. So the way that we do that is we just create a anonymous object and I say return URL equals return. Actually, I think I can just do, I keep wanting to say that I can just do that, but I don't think I can. Maybe I can do it there. Okay, good. Okay, so that should redirect us over to the auth page. So let's see if that works. Let's see if that gives us what we're looking for. I'll give you a hint. It's not. So we go to our settings page, and what do we get here? Too many redirects. What the fuck is this? So let's go ahead and open our navigation network trace. Let's go to settings and see what's happening. Okay, so settings is redirecting us to denied with the return URL, which is correct. Denied is redirecting us to auth, which is with the return URL being passed through, which is correct. It's exactly what we want. It should be giving us the auth page with that URL in the green box. But you can see that the auth page is redirecting us back to settings. Why is that? Why is that? We didn't write any redirect in our auth page to redirect us back. The only redirect in the entire auth page is hard-coded to the account page. So why is this happening? This must be confusing. And in fact, this is confusing. It's extremely confusing, and I spent like an hour trying to figure out why the hell this is happening. I didn't write any code to return the user to that URL. This is not a template page that comes with ASP. We wrote this page from scratch. So why? You know, they're not even getting to see the page, let alone they're not posting back. So why the fuck is this happening? Look at how we're going to work around this, because this video series is not to complain about shit that you can't fix. So I created a second property called return, and we need to keep the original return URL because remember, if someone is not logged in at all and they hit a page that requires authorization, ASP.NET Core is going to use this parameter. Now you can change the parameter name, but you're going to have the same problem. So what we need to do is we need the redirect from the denied page to the auth page to use a different parameter besides the one that ASP.NET Core uses to send them to the denied page. So instead of hard coding the account page, we're just going to say var page equals return. And if we don't have return, we'll use return URL. And if we don't have return URL, then we'll use account. And then we will just redirect them to that. So let's go ahead and do that, and let's also remove the info bubble from our view. So now if I go right into settings, oh, too many redirect. Oh, you know what? I didn't change the So now I have to go to the denied page and change this to use return equals return URL. Settings, boom, and there we go. You can see the return URLs up there. Now if we log in, we should wind up on the settings page instead of the account page, and we do. Perfect. Alright, one thing down, several to go. Okay, so the next item is we're gonna fix up a couple things on our register page. So the first thing we're gonna fix up is that we never asked for a display name, and that is a property that we store on our user account. So right under username, let's ask for a display name. Display name, and this is going to get really meta. We need a display name attribute to format the display name property called display name. And now we can put that here. I don't know what the fuck just crashed in my Visual Studio, but whatever. And let's just say this is not required, but we'll set a max length of like 40 characters just to be helpful. And the other thing that we could do, if we really wanted to, let's just see if we can do it. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, we can. So one thing that we can do is, instead of creating the user down here and reinventing all these properties, we can just change this to user, change that to user, get rid of, I think we can, no, let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of this. Hold on, I'm going to copy that out. We're going to get rid of those things. We're going to leave password and password confirm where they are. And then down here, instead of creating a new user, we're just going to say user is user. And over here, we're going to say user is username, email is email, and this is user capital name. And then on our view, we can actually say user, I think this is a capital N, user.username, user.displayname. And what this is going to do is this is going to bind these properties directly into the user object. So instead of having 3 separate properties on our view model and then manually copying them into the user object, we're just going to let ASP.NET create the user object when the form gets posted. And one change that I do need to make, this just needs to be user.email, that is valid email address. And then I'm going to go into the user class, and I'm going to annotate display name with the display name there. Go ahead and do that. Then I'm going to go back into my register page, and I would like to know why this is. Oh yeah, that's fine. Let's put the word new there. This page already had, the page model already has a user property. I mean, I could have called this something other than user, but I don't really give a shit. And, you know, just to be clean, let's get rid of that and just uppercase any place where we have user, just to clean up the code a bit. And this should work. Let's see why it won't. Actually, I don't know if it will or will not. I'm doing this live, baby. Is it live? No. Memorex. So let's go to account register. And let's just create a new account. Call it Hector. You know what? I think I typed that too fast, and I'm going to wind up with that 400 issue. Okay, so let's call this Hector. Hector Bobbins. And let's create a password for Hector. That works perfectly fine. Good. So that cleaned that up a little bit. Now the other thing I want to do on the register page is someone had commented in the comments on my last video. I'll superimpose that here somewhere. I don't have their name in front of me, but I'll put it on the screen. And had some really good suggestions about our form. Even though it looks pretty and works great on a computer, there's a couple attributes that we can add to make this more mobile friendly. So one thing that we can do here is we can use the autocomplete, and even though Visual Studio only tells me that this should be on or off, there is a property, a official value called username that will allow this field to get pre-filled in by autocomplete for a suggested username, or if the user has a common username. Perhaps if they're using Chrome, it may know what username they want to use. Autocomplete name is how you define a field that would fill in with someone's entire name if they so choose. And for, we don't have to do autocomplete as email, because over here we should really be using type email. And that'll allow you, like if you're on a mobile phone and you go to fill this in, it'll give you like buttons on your keyboard for the @ symbol and .com. It'll make that easier to fill in. And then for the password, there's an autocomplete called new password. And I'm actually going to put that on both of these fields, so that if someone uses like a password manager to generate a new password, it'll go into both of those fields. So there we go. That's perfect. All right, so the next thing we want to do is in our page database table, so our page.cs, we already talked about how we will look pages up either by their ID or their slug. Now, the ID is going to be the primary key of the table. It already is. And that's something that I don't have to define here. If I wanted an ID for called anything other than ID, I would have to put a key attribute here. But the default identity framework is ID, so that's already the primary key. So that is going to be indexed by default, which means that when we have millions of pages in our shitty wiki, the ID is going to be the fastest way to look those up. But we also look pages up by slug, so we want to index the slug property, so that this can be looked up in a timely fashion if the table has, you know, let's say 100,000 or 1,000,000 entries in it. So one thing that we can do is we can create a blank migration. So I'll just do add migration slug index. And this should be blank because I haven't changed anything in the database model, and it is blank. And let me go ahead and fill this in. So all I have to do here is migration builder dot create index, and this wants the string name, so that's going to be the name of the index. We'll just call it ix slug. The name of the table, which is pages, and the name of the column, which is going to be slug. And I think everything else can be pretty much default. And if for some reason someone needs to downgrade the database, you know what, they don't need to downgrade the database. Well, there's not going to be any detriment to if they go back to an older version that being indexed. It should have been indexed in the first fucking place. So now if I do update database, hold on, before I do that, I'm gonna show you what the fucking column looks like now. So if I do indexes, there's only the primary key. And now if I do update database, tra-la-la, done. And now if I refresh this, there we go. There's our index. And if I go to properties, you should be able to see that it's on the slug column. Yep, name slug ascending. So it indexes it internally in ascending order. So it would go through, you know, internally in the SQL server, when you do a where clause, like when you actually look something up, when you filter something, if they're not indexed, normally it has to go through every row in the table and do a comparison check. But when it's indexed, what that means is that as we add pages to our database, it will have a separate table, kind of like a hash table almost, that it will put the slugs into in ascending order, and it may hash them into buckets to make the lookup faster. And that way, when we do a where clause specifically on the slug, instead of having to go through the entire table and compare every value, it can just do a lookup into that table. It can quote unquote index it, if you will, kind of like the index at the back of a book. If you people have ever had a paper book in your hand that had an index, I might be dating myself. All right, so that's that. All right, we're going to do one last thing on today's episode. We're going to add the core framework for database stored settings. So we already went over the app settings.json file and how we can pull these settings into the configuration object and read them and potentially write them at runtime. But there's a bunch of drawbacks with this. Obviously, if an administrator that's on the internet wants to administer their wiki, they want to change settings, we don't want them to have to do it through a file. And we also don't really want to rewrite this file. You know, someone might have comments in here. I mean, there's a million reasons why this JSON file is great for booting up the project and starting the pipeline, but it's really not going to be good for all of the structured data that we're going to want to eventually store. And the other thing is we want it to be extensible. Ultimately, we want people to be able to write plugins for this wiki, and we don't really want to have a lot of bloat in this file. So we want to be able to store settings in the database itself, and then we have all of the benefits that come with that, being able to index them or report on them, whatever, what have you. So we already made a settings page, but I'm going to go ahead and create a folder called admin, which is where we're going to put all of our administrative UI pages. So do admin, and I'm going to take the settings file that we have, and I'm going to put it there. Oops, I put it in share. Let's put it in, oops, I put it in account. Let's put it in admin. There we go. And I'm also going to clone it, and I'm going to call the copy settings debug. So the settings page is going to be a nice UI where an admin can go through and configure all the settings with beautiful radio buttons and checkboxes and text boxes. But I'm also going to have a settings debug page that just spits out the raw settings that are listed in the database. As we develop this, and as plugin developers develop plugins, they're going to want to be able to see what's in that database without anyone ever having to touch this, the SQL Server Management Studio. So we're going to do, we're going to call this raw settings report. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to give it a page route. I'm actually going to say /admin/settings/debug. So admin settings is going to be our main settings page, and settings/debug is going to be our raw page. And before we finish this video out, I'm just going to create the raw exoskeleton of the settings class, or rather the setting class. Setting, actually we're going to call this settings, but the class for an individual setting is going to be called setting. And I'm going to go into my database, and I'm going to add a table. So just like we have pages, we're going to have a table of setting objects, and they're going to be called settings. pages for page, settings for settings. And what is the issue? What is the issue here? It doesn't know where settings is. Oh, because it renamed the fucking class. Whatever. And these settings are going to be defined really simply. There's just going to be 4 properties. There's going to be a name. There's going to be the value. And we're going to add 2 more properties, 2 more pieces of metadata that we're going to track. And this is another benefit of using the database over a JSON file, is that we're going to be able to track who changed it and when. And the when is going to be a date time. And like I said before, since we don't have an ID column, we're going to have to tell Entity Framework that name is going to be our primary key, which means that name will wind up being a unique value. There will only be one setting named foo. There will only be one setting named bar. Roseanne bar. There's only one Roseanne bar. So on the next video, we're going to create a whole framework that makes it easy to read these settings and all the various hundreds of pages that we're going to have that are going to make use of these settings. We're also going to create a beautiful model that makes it really intuitive to store structured data in these settings for both us and for plugin developers. And we're going to bring these settings into dependency injection so that it makes it really straightforward to retrieve these when we need them. And obviously we're also going to build our settings page so that we can edit them. So that's on the next episode. That takes us to the end of the video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, if you want to talk to me about code smells, leave a comment below. If you want to see more, like, subscribe, consider supporting me on Patreon, all the shit that I say at the end of every video. And until next time, stay safe. See ya.